Um, how does one go about assessing and managing the tax and accounting issues for any of the hedges? I think the first stop is to your, after you've identified the issues, and I think there are, like for instance, this afternoon, or this morning really at 11 o'clock, Arthur Anderson is going to talk about some of the accounting and tax issues. I think just to initially identify the issues, there's a lot of literature, and from the banks you're dealing with, for instance, if you're doing an over-the-counter hedge transaction, I think most of the companies, trading houses, our banks we've dealt with, have some people that are experts in those areas that can at least identify for you, probably not give you an accounting opinion or certainly no tax advice, but identify what the issues are. And I think that's the starting point to then go to your in-house accounting controller's office to talk about what their view is on the appropriate accounting treatment. If they're not expert in the area, which they may very well not be, unless they have some specific reason to, their best source of advice is the public accounting firm. Their auditors are going to have seen these issues and probably been following the latest developments and pronouncements for accounting treatment of the various hedge instruments. And likewise on the tax, I think that there are a number of issues. Now, they'll be talked about some this morning by Arthur Anderson in that session, but I think the source for them, first stop, your accounting, in-house accounting people, and then secondly, they're relying on their auditing firm. For some of the newer instruments, I think there are a lot of commodity swaps, for instance. There's some gray area still in terms of the accounting and tax treatment of them, and even some of the credit issues. I was just at a swaps seminar last week, and one of the presentations was a tax or an attorney that had been a counsel for the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and he spent an hour and a half talking about all the gray areas in dealing with commodity swaps. So some of them I think are complex, but there's a lot of sources of information on them. So, yeah. Yes?
How is energy different from hedging the rest of your sweetener exposure? I assume that's mostly corn these days.
Yeah, at one time, we were probably the largest, or second largest, I guess our friends in Atlanta are probably the largest sugar traders in the world. But more so now, grain drive sweeteners. So I guess the point I would make there, whether it's sweeteners or metal or any of the commodities, I think the management issues are the same in energy. Same sort of basis issues on basis risk, same whole set of policy, reporting, and so on. I see them as very similar. So if you've got a program up and running for managing other commodities, I think you have a big step on assessing and managing your energy risk. Yeah.
The second part of my question is, haven't those always been volatile?
Well, you know, and to repeat the question, in managing other commodities, haven't those always been volatile? And I guess the degree of volatility, I mean, with the volatility now in the oil industry, or in the oil pricing, over 100%, it's a question of degree. I know maybe it's a certain, even my comment that the risk maybe wasn't great going back to the mid-'80s, well, it's all relative. 30% average volatility, that's still a volatile market. But if you're a refiner or a producer, and that was a substantial piece of your business, yeah, that's such a volatility. You're probably spending a lot of resources on it. But if you're in the position as an end user, 100 million gallons, perhaps, you know, maybe that's not the big cost component of your business. But if you double, triple the volatility, then suddenly I think it merits attention for a lot of corporations and the people I've talked with in various corporations. You know, yeah.
To what extent are your competitors involved in this process? If you benchmark yourself against them, do you think this gives you a competitive advantage?
Well, the question is, to what extent are our competitors involved in risk management, or specifically perhaps to risk management of energy risk? And what sort of competitive position does that give us? Well, I think, as I said before, I think competitive consideration is an issue. with our competitors, which, depending on which business you want to look at, Coke versus Pepsi, or some of our restaurant businesses, or Frito-Lay, they're snack food competitors. I guess at Coke, I would hope that maybe they took the marketing people that developed their new Coke and put them in charge of risk management. I think Coke is probably sophisticated in managing their overall risk. I didn't know specifically what they might be doing in this area. I don't think we generally not run our business with even though we're in a highly competitive business, I don't think we run our programs specifically with a view toward what our competition was doing. We've taken the view that we're going to optimize our own situation, and in doing so, we're going to have the competitive position. So I guess we are in everything we do, we keep in mind a competitive factor, but it hasn't been on a Me Too sort of basis that Coke is doing this, so we're going to do it, or vice versa. It's just we're going to optimize what we're doing in every aspect of the operation of the business on any of the costs, whether it's one commodity or the next. So, I mentioned that on there because I think that's an issue that when I was in the banking side, sort of on the other side of the desk, dealing with a lot of corporations, that was a lot of times a consideration in how were they going to manage it in a given industry, in the chemical business. How's Brand X doing this, and what does it do to their cost structure, and how are we going to approach it to make sure we stay competitive with them? And I noticed in the press some comments along those lines raised for the airline industry. Or one airline perhaps having a strategy of actively managing their fuel cost, and another having the strategy we talked about a moment ago of simply our hedge is going to be to pass through to the consumer. Well, you know, if you view that the demand for airline tickets being somewhat elastic, well, maybe that doesn't work in a downturn economy. If we're going into a recessionary situation, can you simply pass through the price? Well, it probably doesn't optimize your profits in that situation. So I think it's a consideration. You have to, depending on the business you're in, assess how great a factor in determining your policy would be my view of it. Yeah. Is there another question? We have a couple of minutes. Let me just pose one question to you all. I mean, does anyone have any strong views as to where they think the energy market might be headed? No takers? Because I was saying before, when I originally had agreed to speak today, I'd assumed that by now it might be a particularly hot topic if the war in the Middle East had started and we had $60, $70, $100 oil prices. So that was sort of my outlook at the time, and I would still see some high probabilities toward things escalating over there. Maybe there's a settlement. I mean, markets seem to think that. It was down $2.04 yesterday, but yeah.
Yeah, I never offer my own opinion. I'm not an economist, but I just had the experience of hearing Zbigniew Brzezinski speak to a conference 2 weeks ago. And his outlook is that there will be a war, that it will occur January, February, March, and that oil prices will spike significantly.
There you have to get your hedges in place, I guess.
Get your hedges in place. That's his view.
Well, Margaret Thatcher said essentially the same thing last night. And
Those two people say it. Hey,
there has to be some high probabilities, I would think. Hey, let's hope there is a settlement, but I wouldn't count on it in structuring our hedge program. I was at a forum a week ago, and there was a luncheon speaker, an expert in the oil markets that was giving his forecast, and he didn't want to commit in terms of what he saw in the short term, but he had an interesting long-term forecast. Whether there's a war, there's a settlement, whatever, in the next year, I think he said 1992 to 2010, he was predicting stable oil prices, and he had an interesting sort of entertaining scenario as to how that would develop, basically looking at 100-year history of the oil pricing and cycles and some geopolitical factors, that he was making a case for stability. And I hope he's right, but that was, again, after we get past this Middle East situation. Right now, to follow the fundamentals, it's not a fundamentals market. It's driven by rumors and events in the Middle East. So Offhand, I don't know where oil prices are headed. I know they're going to be volatile until the thing is settled. So, any other questions? Well, thank you very much, and I'd be delighted to talk with any of you after the conference if any specifics you want to talk about on programs. So, thank you. And again, if you'd like a copy of the slides, there are some booklets on the back table. So, thank you. All right. Oh, sure. We're right on. You're finish at 9:30, right?
Yeah, you're perfect timing. Our next session is by your schedule. You can see we got a 15-minute break coming up, and have some coffee for you out there. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Did that come across on the tape?
Excellent.